All right, how's everybody doing? My name is Franklin Cruz. I am a real estate investor and developer. You are listening to the Real Estate Geniuses. In this podcast, we have a special guest. His name is Ricardo Jimenez. Jimenez? Did I mess it up?
Jimenez.
I probably messed it up. I'm sorry. He's a civil engineer of 20 years of experience. Probably I got that wrong. Probably it's 15, but it seems like 20 years to me. And so in this podcast, the biggest thing is this. As I'm a real estate investor and developer, we specialize in development projects and we specialize in dealing with sellers directly to purchase their properties. So in all of our podcasts, you're going to get no fluff, full transparency. We're going to go really knee deep into just what's working, what's not working, and we're going to do that all the time with our guests. So today's guest, again, is Ricardo. This is actually our very first guest that we have on the show, which I'm extremely happy about. Which I just asked him like 5 minutes ago, and I was like, hey, can you come to the office? And he said, yes. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, let's get it right into it. Ricardo, thanks so much for being here, man. Truly appreciate it. I know it's kind of a different atmosphere than what we normally talk over the phone all the time, but let's talk about you, man. So what got you started in civil engineering? Why did you start in the civil engineering world?
Well, it's actually been quite the process, and you were right. It's closer to 15 years. Combined experience between consulting, a couple of years working for developers specifically as well, and now it's already been 2.5 years since I started downtown engineering. So between all of that, it's really been a wild ride. Civil engineering is very, very broad. So throughout my career, I've sometimes focused on different areas, got into different things. So how did I get started in it? It was one of those things where I didn't even know what civil engineering was. I just liked construction, architecture, and the general idea of engineering and building and designing infrastructure.
Now, how did you get introduced to it? Because a lot of people are like, I remember first hearing the word civil engineer, and I was just like, in my head, I'm like, is that an attorney? What is that? You know, so what introduced you to that world? Do you remember like the day that you remember seeing a civil engineer or even the word civil engineer? Like what came up?
No, I was already in school. I was actually already in college because my first major, I started off as a business major, funny enough.
Oh, okay.
And that wasn't really working. Nothing was clicking with me. I was going to school fulfilling a requirement. You know what I mean? And all the way up until I actually made it to UM and then said, okay, let me try industrial engineering, almost, popping up.
Okay.
And then once I got to intro to engineering and I was in that first class and they started talking about all of this, and we started going into CAD and, drawing stuff up. I'm like, wait, I like this.
Really?
And I started getting into it. And,
That's
after that
super
first semester, I changed my major and took it from there.
Interesting.
But
so
yeah.
what was kind of like the first project that you worked on that you're just like, okay, I like this?
So quite a bit, because of course, when you're in school, you don't understand anything until you're out.
Yeah, same here.
I was lucky enough that I really got interning as soon as I could. So I had about 2+ years of experience already once I graduated. So that was very cool.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's as I mentioned, you always learn something every single day. So there's things that I'm seeing today that I couldn't even imagine, 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, I can't imagine.
But yeah, so the first time I saw, what is an engineer? What is all this? It was somewhat in the aspect of, very vague, very, just as I mentioned, everything was linked: construction, architecture, infrastructure, putting all those things. And we did actually have a very cool opportunity when I was in school. Our senior design project was with a real life developer. They found someone local.
A real life one? Okay.
A real life one.
Or you guys picked one up from the street and like, okay, you're going to be a developer today.
We went to Toys R Us and we said, hey, we need to.
Yeah, I was about to say,
but, it wasn't a case study. It was someone
like a
from
real
the
guy
community.
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he somewhat saw the opportunity of, okay, I let the students work on my project. I could get ideas as well.
That's cool.
On what we're working on.
Yeah.
And so we had the possibility of working on Ironside, Miami.
Okay.
Which is a development down there that has multi-use for a lot of different kind of retail, commercial, galleries, all sorts of stuff.
That's cool. Kind of like an art district area.
Yeah, somewhat.
It's called Ironside?
Yeah, Ironside, Miami. Have restaurants. Very, very cool site.
Nice.
And they were looking into expansion. They had just started off with a few spaces, and they had more properties that they could look to convert. But this was all old industrial and old, very old residential. So it was really finding a way to transform, reuse, and find, ways that we could get the old infrastructure converted and reuse it for everything else.
Super cool.
And the owner had a lot of plans of putting also multifamily there and everything else. So We designed a couple of concepts, but at that point in time, I had started already interning as well. So it was very cool to me where I had a lot of people from work giving me all of this input on what I was doing at school. So I came with, very strong projects. So it was very, very cool. It was very cool. But at the same time, as I mentioned, at work, I was being put on these big projects as well from day one. So big projects installing sewer mains down in the Keys, big...
So tell me about the sewer main in the Keys. How was that? Like, how did it even get connected to that?
One of those things that, they were working on that with the Florida Keys Aqueduct Authority.
Okay.
And down there, and we have, this might be its own episode itself on, all the different conditions we have here in Florida, right? Florida's a very, very unique state. I do believe, now that I've had the chance to work in a few other places, that Florida is one of the most difficult places to develop and make money. I'm certain of that. We have, we've seen it in some projects, stormwater issues, utilities, water availability. It's tough.
Yeah.
But ultimately, all of that stuff came together. So,
and that was one of your very first projects, was the sewer main, the iron side in Miami. And then where did you intern at? With a developer too, or a civil engineering group?
So I interned with a civil engineering company called Chenmore & Associates. They're a Florida firm, very, very recognized firm here in the state. As I mentioned, I also did work after that in development for a couple of years. So that was a lot of single family, finding, the whole process. They would find the property, just how you guys are doing today, and get through it. But also a lot of, conversions and
got it.
Things. So that was a fun couple of years. I feel like I've had a little bit of, from different sides. So
what do you think was, so you can explain to the audience as well, what's the role of a civil engineer in a development project? Like I could tell you, like in my side as a developer, to me, your role is, but I would love to hear from your perspective. What's your role you feel for developers in that world, especially if somebody's new, they don't even know, first time hearing the word civil engineer, and it's not an attorney, right? They don't deal with the civil courts. What is it? Go ahead. You can explain it.
Yeah. So when we're talking about land development services and we're talking about this side of the business, we do way too many things, man.
I know.
Of course, there's a civil engineering side and there's a general consulting side. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, every single day I do a little bit less engineering. So for focus on the engineering side, I'm saying specifically, what is your civil engineer doing and what is he engineering?
Yeah.
This is typically the person that is going to design and develop the construction documents, basically, the ingredients and the recipe for your contractor to go out and build your development, your particular piece of infrastructure. So let's take an example. We're building communities with duplexes, multifamily homes.
We could bring up the Pope Parkway one, the one that we've been working on forever.
To give some examples.
Yeah, so this is a live example. This is an asset that me and some partners we own. It's 130 plus acres off of Pope Parkway. This is the site right here. So it's 3 separate parcels and assemblage. And now, this is what we thought we could do with it. If you remember, it was the residential.
When we started.
Yeah, and then now, but we had different options. So we had the residential side, and then we also had, if I remember correctly, we had, what was it? Light industrial.
We've had industrial business parks.
Yeah, so this is another one. This is the business park right here. So this could be apartments on one side or townhouses, apartments, self-storage we even thought about. Veteran Park. So kind of, I remember in my head, civil engineers, the developer has to kind of come up with what's the idea that I'm thinking about. And then a civil engineer in my head is like, we're consulting and then we're figuring out, can we do it? Is the zoning there? Or can we, get an up zoning or down zoning? Meaning, hey, if it's a low residential, can we get it to high density? Can we get it from light industrial to heavy industrial? Can we fill in a lake? These are different things that came up that you've been crucial on as well, because now we looked at this lake and now we're figuring out, well, that wasn't a lake, it was a man-made pond. You want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, there's all sorts of conditions in these, as you were mentioning, and I also have actually a question for you on the zoning in a second. But yeah, as you're saying, every single project is different. There, even if you are the same developer that you have, your MO is I do industrial. Even
Yeah.
if you buy neighboring lots, every single one of those lots can have different conditions, can look different, can have different requirements. So it is always something that we're looking at. So my question for you is, in a lot of these projects, we always deal with zoning. We're always
Yes.
looking at all that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of movements that I see from the public side, from
Yep.
the people in city government to make changes. We have these new future land use, the comprehensive maps, all of this.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be solving the issue. I feel like we're still going with developers back and forth on zoning and all of that.
Yeah.
Have you thought about this, or do you have any ideas? Do you have anything of this would make the process simpler?
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to see on that
Oh,
side?
100%. So let me get straight what you're asking. Also,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. So what you're saying on the public and private side, dealing with, technically the private or public is the government, right? So the government owns all the land. Period. Let's just be clear on everything. So anything that you pay taxes on, technically you don't own.
Yeah.
Because the minute
still
you
paying for it.
yeah, the minute you think you own it is the minute. Don't pay your taxes and see how quickly you figure out you don't own that, because they're going to take it from you. It doesn't matter if you have a mortgage, because taxes supersede that. And then the other thing is, what I've learned is we have to have a relationship. They need us and we need them. At the end of the day, they're never going to develop, and when they do, they're always over budget because they don't care. At the end of it, it's like there's no incentive for the public, which is the government, to actually do a good job and save money, because there's no incentive for the person at all. There's incentive to us, but also we have a huge risk because it could go sideways, but we want to do the project. A lot of developers, they want to leave a legacy behind. For me, I could care less about legacy. It's just, it's a complex problem, and I love chess. So to me, I just look at development as the ultimate chess game with real pieces, and you could do something cool. Like, I just look at the cool factor, and if you could develop it and do it, like, to me, cool factor goes up to 10, right? And so how we solve it, I believe, is sometimes it's okay to go back into history rather than creating a history. So if you go back into history in the 1900s, how did they actually develop? So you know how they did so the amount of permits that needed to get pulled back then was, here's my blueprint, which sometimes people drew, like hand drawn, right? Here's my blueprint. They would approve it. You would do a little site survey, and then you would just build, and you would tell them, hey, this is what I finished, and they would approve it, right? Like, literally, and those homes still stand till today. Now you have a permitting process that is not fun to go through, right? And it actually questions, why am I even doing this, right? Because any project, even a simple house, is going to take anywhere from a year to 2 years to build. And it's not the building, it's the paperwork to get approval for it. So, you've got a site, you got to do your site plan, then you got to get that approved. Then you got to make sure you have a blueprint. Then you got to get that approved. Then you got to turn that in. That could take months, because they usually have one old guy, which they have over here in Polk County, that's 78 years old, that needs to retire, but he's still there. He wears bifocals. I love him. He's a great guy, but really, come on now. He's any day now, he's going to get cataract, right? So if you think I'm lying, go to your building department, right? And so it slows down everything. And there's three things in development that matter in a developer, and that you cannot control cost. You can't control cost of money. You can't control cost of construction. And the only thing you can control is cost of land. So the land is a big thing. So to me, in my head, is number one, downgrade a lot of how these inspections and permits are going. Like, it's just ridiculous. Go 100% virtual. Stop doing it the other way. The other thing is streamline the process. If a blueprint is approved from an architect who's a licensed architect, then just literally he should be able to say, if he is qualified with the building department, whatever he says, you're good. He's not going to miss it. He's already licensed. Like, the guy who's actually checking the blueprints is not a licensed architect. Because if they were, they wouldn't be working for the government, right? So what comes up for you hearing all this? I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm answering the question or not, but to me, it's streamlining it and having it a lot faster and taking out a lot of the paperwork, and especially in shitty areas or lower socioeconomic areas, take away your impact fees. Impact fees right now in Northwest Lakeland, in an area that nobody wants to go. I'm the only one building right now, some modern properties because I believe in the future. The impact fees are more than what I pay for the land. $26,000 for impact fees in land that was going over there for less than 20. And impact fees you have to pay up front before you start. And the connection fee to water and wastewater is $3,000. So you're into it before you even start for 29 grand. And they want to change the community? No, you can't. How are you going to do that? Nobody, what's the incentive? And then impact fees are a monopoly, meaning they go up every single year. And the excuse is we need it for X, 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 but there's still a lot of waste going on when it comes to funds. You know, why is it that we have 1,000 employees for a small county, but we're not using modern technology? And then most of these employees are mini monopolies, meaning they're all making six figures or more. There's over 200 people that make $100,000 or more in Polk County alone, right? That's a good chunk. And then when you ask them what they do, a lot of them don't do much. A lot of it doesn't take much, but because it's in there so deep, it's difficult. So to me, that's what I would do. I would like what they're doing at Doge right now, Department of Government Efficiency. I think we need that in every small government. You would take it out rather than put it back in so much. Like cut things first and cut it so much that people are like, oh crap, we cut. Yeah. But then figure out a way to actually be efficient rather than keep raising costs. Stop raising the taxes. Stop raising impact fees. The only reason why they raise it is because they're not sitting down and saying, hey, how do I smartly actually decrease costs and increase happiness? Because to me, the government, the only job you got is to make the people in your area happy.
It should be.
It's
supposed to be.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my long time. So go ahead. What comes up for you hearing that?
There's a lot of things, but especially the streamlining, what happens is, and with a lot of what you're saying, we're already used to this system where costs don't go down anymore. We're used to it, and they already have us where things only go up.
Yeah.
And so they don't get rid of stuff. They just keep adding to stuff.
Exactly.
So that's where it's really difficult. Now, you did make a very good point as in, he's a licensed architect. He's a licensed engineer. He should know.
Yeah.
And it's true, but it isn't. It's one of those things. And the reason why, at least how I see it, is because of how separated it is, how difficult it is, how many different organizations and entities there are, how many agencies we have to present to. Because this is the thing. Any normal development, we are not only talking with one agency, we're talking with several. We're talking with sometimes the city, the county, the water management district, the health department, Army Corps. It's really a list of agencies that don't talk to each other, but we have to somehow, fulfill all the requirements at once. Yeah. And that's what's really difficult. So you'd say, okay, the architect engineer, he should know that it's 3 feet separation here. But what's hard for the engineers is that they have to, for each and every project, we have to go in through all these codes where the code for Polk County itself is totally different from the code to City of Lakeland. So you might be working 3 blocks apart, but totally different requirements for each. So, it's hard to be able to always have exactly,
I
your
agree
requirements
with you. I
set
think
up.
even that needs to be more streamlined. Like it can't.
Exactly.
It can't. Look, I look at it like this. How damn difficult is this? We have been building for 2,000 years. We have been living in America. Like America's been a society with property since 1800s. Okay. Since 1900s, we've been building homes. Like people back then would go on the Sears catalog, order your home. It would be shipped to you in horse and carriage, right? And you would build it with the blueprint. And literally the process was just streamlined. And it was simple. And those homes actually last longer than the new homes right now.
So and I live in a 100-year home, so I agree.
Yeah,
But my
which
thing
I
is,
love those. Just FYI, like to me they're epic.
no, but this is the thing, and I want to say this was, I may be mistaken here, but it's probably Thomas Jefferson or something like
Yeah.
that back then at one point said, all right, we have all this land,
Yeah.
we're going to divide it by the mile, we create the public surveying system,
Yeah.
and here you go. There's land all over America, right?
Yeah.
But today, somehow, we're in this system where you are 10 minutes down the road from, Mulberry or just South Lakeland, and you have totally different regulations to where we are right
100%,
now. So those
100%.
are things that, for me, there's a disconnect, and metropolitan areas at least, or, somewhat of regional locations have to be a little bit more, as you're saying, maybe streamlined, but also just say, all right, we're doing it like this in this area. So, you can buy something, throughout Lakeland, throughout Polk County, and understand what you're building.
Oh yeah, 100%. So this is actually what you're bringing up on the Thomas Jefferson, I believe it was. So this is kind of like when they were designing the mall in Washington, just showcasing that. But things were simpler. And the funny part is, back then, and what I mean when I say back then, there was a golden age of architecture. There was a golden age of site plan. There was a prestige that I feel that it was. Like, to be a developer, first of all, back then, architects were developers. Like, they were actually, like, they were developers, architects, like, everybody did everything,
several
right?
hats.
Yeah, they weren't so, like, a GC wasn't just a GC. No, that GC knew electrical, plumbing. He could everything. There was multi-skilled rather than specific skill, right? I think we should go back to that as well. And also, there was a beauty about architecture. There was a beauty about civil engineering. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. Like, when you look at this is a site plan. This is gorgeous. Nowadays, you look at stuff, you're like, I could throw up. Like, compare this to, like, even our site on Pope Parkway, right? Nothing wrong with the site plan, but it ain't that nice. Like, this is our Olive Street one. You're like, okay, it's nice. Okay, it gets the job done.
It doesn't go that miles. But you did say something very important, which is a problem I see as well. So as a civil engineer, I'm very trained in civil engineering. I am not that familiar with, details and specifics of electrical engineering, mechanical, other things, which I make an effort personally to understand, because that's going to give you the full picture. You understand, all right, we still need space for transform. We know it really brings it together, but it's not something natural in our education system today. No. It's like, you're civil, so you do this. And a lot of the guys we meet are wired that way.
Oh, yeah. And to me, I think now with AI coming up and robotics coming up, because no doubt, I believe as a developer for myself, and it's taken me 20 plus years to get to where I'm at. And I've went through these small transitions from starting from a small little house when I was in the military to then transitioning and messing up a ton on small houses, right? And then having this transition to then building something, just actually like building off of a house, then building one house with Habitat for Humanity, then taking one house, subdividing it, building 3, then working on multiple developments that we're working on.
Each stage.
Yeah, and then even developments, you've got large, this is not even a large scale, this is mid scale. This is a 96 unit project in comparison to our Pope Parkway one, which is a large scale. This is tiny, we're not even talking about that right now.
This one's...
Yeah, so then you've got the large scale development, which is on Pope Parkway. And that one, you're talking about 130 acres, which they would consider that a master plan community. And that's something the size of this. Now, there's no beauty in it at all. Now, we could make the homes beautiful. That's how I look at it. But at the end of the day, for something like this, now it's just a numbers game. Because at the end of the day, right now, people can't afford housing. And it's not just going to increase. What happens is what happened with COVID. COVID kind of screwed up. It basically took what should have took 30 years on appreciation of housing, and it squished it down to 4 years. And just remember, overspending on government. When it's kind of like if you don't have it in your bank account and you're broke already, but because you say I'm broke, right? So you have negative minus, but then you said, well, let's take out another $1,000 and let's put it on red. Well, then you lose again, and it raises the cost of everything around you because you're already broke. That's kind of how, and this is just facts. This is like, I'm not political about this. This is just like, that's what happened. So when you're in debt, everything's just going to increase because of inflation. Well, what happens is construction increase, the cost of money increase. Land is iffy about, you've got to just get a good deal. So the only way you can make things happen at a low cost is you got to increase the density as much as possible so the numbers make sense. So,
And
yeah.
there's two things to that as well, because we are seeing with COVID as well, we had something else, which was a massive migration throughout the country.
Oh,
where
yeah.
Right here in Polk County, we are one of the
Number
highest
one.
growing.
Number one
Yeah.
right now in the
And
country.
for years, we've been top of that list.
Yeah,
So
20% year over year growth.
exactly. So there is a mixture of things happening where local markets such as ours are seeing
Yeah.
crazy explosion. And that's a lot of where this zoning for me is coming in, where there needs to be a system where the public side and our municipalities can react quicker to what's going on.
Yeah.
And we can marry all this together where, hey, we need more density. We need to be able to
Yeah.
streamline this. We need to be able to do all these things.
Yeah. You know, we're smack dab in the middle of Tampa and Orlando. These are two juggernauts. You know, people are predicting right now that Tampa's going to be just as big, if not bigger than Boston, which is huge. And Orlando, that is the family center of the world. When you really think about it, like that's it. And the beautiful thing about Lakeland, what I love so much is we have the largest stretch of I-4 throughout the entire state of Florida. And a lot of people don't know this, but Lakeland's also the industrial capital of Central Florida, meaning we have more projects, and I know this because I'm literally doing them, right, on the industrial side than anything. I even got a project that we were working on off of Old Tampa Highway. I did this large assemblage that we took from 22 acres to 66 acres. On that particular project, I actually got bought out by my partner because we brought in Johnson Development Group, and then he's like, hey, I'll just buy you out. And I was like, yeah, I'll take the money now. No problem. Of course I want that money. And it worked out for everybody on that particular deal. So this was, that was our 7-acre deal. So this had several different parcels on there. And so if I remember correctly, this was old. Well, why I pull this up, what's your thoughts on just the growth of Lakeland, just the different asset classes that you've noticed, and then municipalities as well, just getting stuff approved?
Yeah, of course. So I did want to ask your opinion on that as well, on what you saw coming in the future, since you're involved so much on that side. But at least from what I'm seeing, it's very, very, very much like the secret is out of how good of a location Polk County is.
Yeah,
and little by little, different industries and different people have seen that are starting to capitalize. If you see Florida right now, Florida's always been, important within the country and all of that. But
Yes.
we were talking about these times since COVID. Florida is one of the most productive states in the whole nation.
Yes.
And that's not stopping anytime soon, as you mentioned.
No.
We have more and more industries coming in. We have more and more growth. We have all of these things coming together. Now, what we have right here in Polk County is right now, 2025, it has been a crazy year, at least on my side, for transportation, logistics, warehousing, storage. That's 99% of what has come in this year. And really what they're seeing is that this is simply a great place for, their headquarters and for, all this coming together for Florida. Because, of course, you have easy access, of course, through I-4. You have access to 275 to I-95. You can come in through 27, through 17, go through the Green Swamp. You have access to almost every corner of Florida from this location. So it simply makes sense. You're about 4 hours.
And we have an international airport now.
I mean, we're 4 hours away from, each basically side of the state. So they simply see it as it's just a no-brainer to set up headquarters in Florida. And then you add that to growth, we actually have people here that are now,
we have tax.
Technical skills, exactly. All the conditions we have already in Florida, such as no state tax, it makes it easy for people to move here and to keep that growth going.
A strong homestead laws as well.
So really what I'm seeing is, as I mentioned, for right now, I feel like the industrial, companies are really saying, all right, that has to be our next goal. I'm seeing a lot of that.
I agree.
But at the same time, I want to mention more of what you're saying. It's not something new either, because there's a reason that we have Pepsi, station here. We have Coca-Cola right here. We
Geico,
have,
Publix.
And if you go out to, more in the industrial sector, there's a lot going on in, the Lake Wales, Auburndale area,
Yep.
big companies, construction, manufacturing, all
Mhm.
that stuff has been here for a long time, and there's a reason for it.
Yep.
So now simply that the state is booming, well, there's a lot more coming with it.
1,000,000%. I agree.
It's one of those things where growth is always exponential, right? We can stay on a great track for a long time, but there's going to be something, a trigger that just takes it that way.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, it seems like that's where we are.
I agree.
And I mean, what are the ways we take advantage of it, right, is the important part.
Oh,
But,
yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a pure example, too. So this is a site I worked on for a long time. And this was a deck that we created for Johnson Development Group when we were working with that group when they wanted this site. So this is off of Old Tampa Highway. And just to kind of show them, so whenever myself, I'm a developer, right? So I've got to showcase other groups that don't have the knowledge about Central Florida and what's going on, and we have to showcase that to them on these decks. There's a huge 740-acre development called the Central Park, Lakeland Central Park. That's an industrial park. Bonnet Springs, which is walking distance from where we're at right now in the office. Huge, beautiful park. It's actually the largest public park, I believe, in Florida. And it's gorgeous. It's all free. And it looks like it should be paid for because it's actually bigger. I think they said it's bigger than the Animal Kingdom at Disney, which is amazing.
Wow.
We have amazing parks. A lot of people don't know this too. If you love Frank Lloyd Wright, then you need to come to Lakeland because the most square footage of Frank Lloyd Wright architecture is here at Florida Southern. A lot of people don't know that. So what I initially did is I contracted one property for 22 acres. And that was a 3040 Old Tampa Highway. And then I did an assemblage, meaning I started gathering the properties around it. And then we said, hey, we could probably do almost 200,000 square feet if we did this assemblage here. So, site A, B, and C, and D, right? So it shows right here. And then through time, because they said, hey, we want to expand. So a lot of times these bigger companies, a lot of people don't understand this on the development side. And unless you're knee deep, kind of like yourself, you're in the civil engineering side. I'm more in both facets. I'm the acquisition and disposition, and I'm in the middle, right? So I really see an amazing amount of activity and really what companies are looking for. So, because I've dealt with Opal Fuel, I've dealt with Florida Gas, I've dealt with KB Homes, D.R. Horton, Johnson. These are billion-dollar organizations, and I've worked with them. And I do that on purpose because I want to get the insight of how they negotiate. What are they thinking about? Why do they want this asset class? How do they think? And how can I help them? Because at the end of the day, they need me more than I need them. There's plenty of people with tons of money that want to come to Florida. You know that. But there's not too many people that understand the land aspect on what to do with it, how to do with it, and how to conform it as well. So this one, I locked up. These are small houses. So, I'm an investor as well. So I buy the houses. So we locked up B, C, D, and then we came up with the assemblage. And I had the idea of doing like a veteran park in one of the areas. I thought it would be cool. So these are all the assets. Then I saw that this property, I could lock up this other 22 acres. So now we have 48 acres. So now we did an assemblage, and then we showcased this kind of conceptual plan. Right now we're like, okay, now we went from having 22 acres to 48 acres. Now we're growing it pretty substantial. Like we could put, if I do the basic math, like 500,000 square feet of space, right? And then we figured out we could possibly do something with this center road because this is owned by the county, and we can get a cross entrance agreement from them. And so then this is what those look like. I was trying to make it nice and pretty for Johnson. And then I said, then I contacted the owner over here, and I got that property under contract. So now we went from 22 acres, and I tripled the size to 63 acres. And then showed them what we could potentially do. So long story short, we went from 22 to then gathering this entire site to 66 acres that we could potentially do this. Now, this is a complicated site doing the assemblage. It took a long time. Now, the funny part is every property that I contracted was actually 1 day apart. So B, I contracted, I remember it was I was driving back from New York. I drove to New York and back to meet my mentor. So I got B under contract on like a Tuesday. C under contract the next day, D under contract the next day, and then E under contract the following day. Yeah. So and then, you got to communicate. I have to communicate with like yourself. On this project, we didn't know each other at the time, but this is a kind of deal that you would be working on to say, okay, now the 22 acres, what's possible on the 48 acres, and now what's possible on the 63 acres, and then we don't know, okay, where's the retention? Where's the wetland? Then we found out this area on E has an easement from Duke Energy that you can't build nothing underneath power lines, but you can park underneath them as well. So yeah, it's a very unique site, but kind of what comes up for you seeing all this in your head?
No, fun project. I mean, interesting on both sides. On the acquisition side and just chasing those deals had to be interesting. And this is one of those that is probably going to be a little bit of a nightmare, working with the county on the cross.
Oh yeah, well
actually, stuff. But ultimately it's part of the deal. It is what it is.
One side was county, one side was city. So we actually would have to get them to annex one or the other. And they both have, and that's the other thing a lot of people don't know. The county may say on their topo boundary tree survey, hey, we need to survey every tree over 12 inches. The city doesn't care. So you don't...
Exactly. They might have completely different requirements. And that's the thing. So a site like this one, Polk Parkway, I want to say has the same issue where you might be, even if you're close to city boundary lines wherever some of this affects you, some of these sites we're dealing with.
That's
the
right
county,
here.
Yeah.
City of Auburndale's on option A, which we own, and option B is our neighbor.
And they're out in the county. So, simply seeing it this way, if you were to have option B and only develop option B, because out there we still need to have City of Auburndale utilities no matter what. Yeah. So you would go through your building permit process with the county. You would have to go through your utility connection process with the city, but you would still have to go then through the water management district for your stormwater. You would have to go. It's still such a patchwork of regulations and things that really need to get.
And that's the funny part is then they complain, why isn't more development happening? And we're explaining it right now. This is why it's not happening, is because you've got any development, whenever you look at it, whenever I look at a subdivision, now that I know development, I'm like, that was 3-4 years in the making. Because you have to get it under contract. You got to figure out what's even possible, right? The conceptual idea of it. Then I got to go to, like yourself, civil engineer, get the conceptual plan done, or I could, if I have somebody in-house, right? Get it done, then figure out, hey, what is the city going to say about this site, right? And that looks like...
Start walking it through pre-application meetings.
Yeah, so this is...
concept reviews and all that stuff.
This was Olive Street a couple years ago.
Start meeting with utilities and actually start going through the process of what is it going to take.
Yeah. And then these are all the departments that you've got to coordinate with. You got development coordinated. You got water utilities. I don't even know what CPA is. I forget what that is. Sufficiency.
That you have everything in order. If you don't know impact fees, if you have agreements in place, Then
you got zoning. Then you got electric. Then you got fiber. Then you have fiber optic, right? Then you got transportation. Then you got traffic engineering. Then you got PW engineering. Public works. Then you got fire, which any one of these can kill your deal. So I just want to let you know, like anybody, go ahead.
At least this is, and it is reasonable. Ultimately, all these guys, all these experts end up, looking and making sure that, you tick all those boxes. The problem is that when they don't really talk to each other. And the problem is when we don't have, let me say it this way. There are places I work within Florida that we can have the same exact development, but the cost is simply double. Because of the local requirements, because of how many notes we need to have on there, because it takes us that much more time to put these documents together.
Yeah, and it's not like me and you are free either.
Yeah, so it's something silly.
We've got to eat. You know what I'm saying? I was like, even though we're Spanish and we only got arroz con pollo, like we need that arroz con pollo.
Rice is getting expensive, so that's the thing. We have to account for all these things, and it's silly when we're building the exact same thing. We might be the exact same materials contract. What is the where can we meet in the middle or something where this makes more sense to everyone? It's streamlined.
No, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, because and at the same time, because from my side at least, and all the time I'm in the Muni code, I'm looking over land development codes, all this stuff. And there's parts that are, simple to understand. There's
Yeah.
parts that I have some time myself because it's,
Yeah.
it's requirements and engineering stuff within legalese and all. And so it's, and I understand why it's like that, but I
Yep.
also feel, okay, how do we make this practical? Because functionality,
Yeah.
has to be possible
No,
here. But
I a million percent agree with
these
you.
are simply thoughts from, years of doing this, but ultimately that's why I want to bring it up now that I have the opportunity to say, okay, on the development side, what are we looking at? What is a way that we can make that happen as well? But
Yeah. To me, I always look at it like you've got to be able to simplify, right? Because at the end of the day, there was a time frame that there was a lot more simplification. What happens is every department, it's kind of like when I was in the military, right? So the government is first of all, the government, if you take out the word government and you just say like America Inc., right? Right. So it's a company, but it's a company at the limit. So they know any local municipality is a part of the government. It's a subsidy of the government. But look at the government as a company, right? So if that company is America Inc., then America Inc. has Lakeland Inc., right? And then Lakeland Inc. has Polk County Inc., Auburndale Inc., all these companies. So what happens is then these companies, they are monopolies. So they have zero competition and there's little oversight on even that individual. So what happens is, like, for example, each one of these individuals, right? Water, utilities, everything else. These are the heads. It's like the easiest way is I look at it like they are the Caesars of their department. And if they really want to make your life hell, which I've had that happen as well, they can. And they can nitpick the shit out of you over small little things, even though there's a ton of Florida statutes. Like there's the Florida, I forget what it was, the Florida statute 1222, right? And that, I believe that was the Florida statute for affordable housing, which says, hey, you're supposed to streamline a development and speed a permit process. And, excuse me. Allow a site plan, for example, if it's in a lower socioeconomic area, like they don't always have to have a porch. They don't always have to have the front. You can make it whatever is feasible to move the project forward. Just get it done, because the faster you can get that done, it's not like construction's not going to not pass the inspections. So it's going to be buildable. But it's these little things that get in the way and then what I have seen is like some people are just not creative. So you have a building department, but it's not the whole department. Remember, you have a mini Caesar who can be, let's say, the planning department who has to approve the site plan. And he just keeps on, no, I don't believe it. Well, sir, we have the Florida statute says this. Well, I don't care.
Well, and I mean, it comes with levels, right? Because I do see their side where, and not only their side, but all of our sides is there's a certain amount of whose responsibility is it, in a sense.
I agree.
And these guys, at the end of the day, being city employees and reviewers, they have to respond to, whatever the code says and make sure that if it gets approved and it was not actually per code, they're the ones in trouble.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
And
I agree with
really
that.
what happens is that, what we're building, right? These things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
so
and cost of money goes up.
Exactly. So something
Cost
gets
of
built.
construction too.
Something gets built that he tells you, hey, yeah, you can build it without a porch. You go ahead, you spend all the money, you do it already, and then they tell you, oh no, it did have to have that. Well, that's going to be a big issue for you. You already accounted, you already went through this process. It's not.
Yeah.
So there's a certain level of why I understand it's that way, but I do 100% agree with, okay, how do we make it so it actually does work, the way it should?
To me,
how do
it's
we take
simplified.
the responsibility away from, he's, at the end of the day, he's a guy like you and me just going to work every day.
Oh,
How do we take the responsibility away from him and make it streamlined for everyone?
I 100%
You know what I
agree
mean?
with you. And I think it's almost like, as a developer and probably even a civil engineer, I think what we are is we're just attorneys in the field of development. Because at the end of the day, we need paperwork. And I don't think people understand the civil engineers. And correct me if I'm wrong. On my side, on the development side, I don't think anybody understands the amount of level of organization of administrative that there is. Like, for example, if I'm looking at just one of my sites, this is one of my project folders. This is not small. Like, I'm keeping copies of literally every single thing that I have going on with this site. And this is just one of our sites, right? So,
But it
go
goes
ahead.
back to a little bit of what we were just saying, responsibility, because you have so many legal documents on one side simply
yeah.
for, contract things. Then it's so many legal documents on the side of what we're, building, what's actually going to go there, what we're constructing with the builders, it's a number of things, and it's necessary. But no, for sure, you guys,
100%.
so that's the thing. So sometimes I do understand where we're looking at sometimes small requirements or old
Yep.
notes or things like that.
Yep.
And, they may seem small, and yeah, okay, we'll knock them out. But ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
it is more time, more money, more added to it, and
100%.
more responsibility. Yeah, it just keeps going.
I want to bring up a site that I think I just found out that you told me that you know this guy, and this guy called me up. He's a local. I don't know if I would. He's a local landowner. I want to give credit to developers who actually do it, right? But there are a lot of landowners that want to get into development. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all started that way. When you first start as a developer, for myself, you first start with this idea, and then God sometimes blesses you with a piece of land that you work out a deal. And then you kind of go with, we just went over the Dunn-Kruger effect, right? And so in the beginning of development, I look at it like this. Everybody is in the peak of Mount Stupid, right? So you first probably start, like for me as a developer, when I first started, I was like, I can build a subdivision. And it's like peak of Mount Stupid because I don't have the knowledge to do anything, right? But I'm going to tell everybody because at the time I was like, oh yes, I know nothing, but I have confidence super high, right? And then you start the journey and then you're like, the valley of despair. I don't know anything, right? So for me, I've learned to kill my ego, right? And then through time, if you can get past the valley of despair and start gaining knowledge through wisdom and experience, then you can go through the slope of like enlightenment. And then eventually, I actually feel like I'm like right in this place that now I'm
You've
feeling
realized it?
Yeah, like now, like I can look at something like I know my stuff, like the day that I remember like knowing Spanish, even though I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I remember a time frame that I saw this guy, we're in the bathroom. I know it's weird, but this guy was an older gentleman and he spilled some stuff on the floor. And I said, por favor, limpio de baño. And I was like, oh my God, I'm speaking Spanish. I was like, I haven't said that. I was like, what? What did I was like, yeah, I was like, I know Spanish. And I remember it because I just instantly said it, but I can't remember ever saying that in my life. I just remember my grandmother always telling me, like, por favor, limpio de baño. Because I'm like 5 years old and I pee on the walls, right? Yeah, thanks, guys. But that's what kind of I look at in the beginning. I think we all go through this Dunn-Kruger effect. I don't know. What comes up for you seeing this?
Oh, I go through this daily. Valley of Despair is, a good chunk of the day. And how do we get through this?
It's so true.
It keeps going. Yeah, no, this gets me a little bit scared. I'm like, what time is it? But
yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
So like on this guy, I think it hit with Mr. Clark. We'll just call him Mr. Clark. So Mr. Clark on this deal, he had a 3-acre parcel, 3.5 acres, I think. You know more about the site than I do. So anyway, he called me up. And he's like, hey, I want to sell this site. I want to get rid of it. I owe a lot. Now he owes a lot of people money on it too. That's what happens sometimes. You dig into it and you don't know. You have the greatest intention to do something with the site. But as a developer, if you've never done this before, don't think that you're just going to jump in and build. Because there's so much more to this. Like there's so much more, right? And you don't, if you've never built before, you're probably not going to be able to get qualified. So you got to understand pro formas, how to raise capital. Like it's a lot. And then when I noticed on this deal, he's like, yeah, we got approved for 84 units. And I was like, 84 units in the middle of a normal subdivision? I was like, okay. I was like, if you got approved, I said, but you're going to have a hard time. You got a train track right behind you. So when you see a site like this and you see and Mr. Clark, for example, like what came up for you when you first initially saw this site?
No, this actually has been a fun one, and we worked through the design for it. So,
oh, that's even better.
Yeah. So no, funny enough, we have laid out. Was it 3 or 4? It was, I want to say 4 buildings.
Okay.
So we have 4 buildings. We have the 86 units laid out. There's a wall. So there's a certain setback and screening requirement against the railroad as well is how we had to figure it out.
So then you guys got with the PUD.
yeah, so all that
Can
I
you explain
believe
what a
has
PUD
been.
is to somebody who's like 10 who doesn't know what that is?
Yeah, so the
And
explain
it's
like I'm
not PUD.
5, but
It's a, go ahead.
so a planned unit development. So what happens also is the term planned unit development is specific here to Lakeland, but
Yeah.
basically most municipalities will have some kind of version of it, something similar. But basically, you come in with a certain intention like this one. So a planned unit development, like this one, what we're saying with this number of units, is not you not like what's there today, which is you go in, you buy a single family house. It's a little bit more of a straightforward process.
Yeah.
But since this planned unit development will need more infrastructure to support that number of units, it's something that then is submitted to the city for a more thorough review.
Got it.
And not only do they need to review your units and how those are laid out, but also how are you, as I mentioned, delivering and proposing that ancillary infrastructure. So what I mean by that is, how are you getting water to all these units? How are you getting sewer connections to all these units? How are you providing stormwater management for everything you're building, all the new impervious you're adding?
Fire.
Are you providing fire? How are you providing parking spaces,
Fiber optic.
sidewalks?
Yeah.
All, fiber, electric, all these connections. So all these are taken into account.
Basically, all these comments have to be zeroed out. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So every comment that you're going to get from a project review from whatever municipality, every single category, every single department has to be accounted for and called out and then zeroed out.
And so basically, depending on where you are, there's a number of requirements or certain levels of development reviews or development applications. Some of these might be based on your use, whether it's industrial, commercial, residential, or it might be based on size. Every municipality is different. Central Florida itself, as we were mentioning, you can be in City of Lakeland, you can be in Auburndale, you can be in Polk County, Orange County, Orlando, Tampa. All of these will have very specific and different permitting requirements and applications. But what's important to know is that most likely, if you are doing something in your property, double check with your building department.
Oh yeah, 100%. This is a copy of the PUD, just so I can if people can have reference. This is one what we did on 1506 Olive when we got the POB approval for 96 units. So what I've seen is they do a proposed ordinance and then it's signed by the mayor. Then it's actually adopted into your comprehensive plan of your county or your municipality, and then they sign it. This took this. And just to get to this status sometimes could take 6 months to 2 years or plus, and the only reason why we even did this is because at the time we were going to do affordable housing on the site. And then, so here's the site, and it had a light industrial zone, or no, it had a business park zoning in the front, and then it had residential in the back. Right. And so we got everything basically approved. And they signed it, and then this was also the conceptual plan that they got approved for it as well. Now, what happened was affordable housing came in, and they didn't get the grant. So because they didn't get the grant, we couldn't move forward with affordable housing, and then we scratched the deal. So, but this is kind of the paperwork of what it looks like if you ever get a PUD. And again, every municipality is totally different. I'm sure in Miami, it's probably longer or shorter. I don't know.
It's horrible.
Is it? What's so horrible about Miami side?
No. So Miami's tough. What happens is as we were saying, the disconnect. Some things are getting better, and more departments talk to each other now. But ultimately, out of any place that I've worked at, Miami has the strictest requirements.
Really?
The most amount of anything needed, the most amount of whatever you want to compound it in any way.
Wow.
It's really hard over there.
Well, they say Miami though is going to be like the next New York City, which I agree.
I mean, New York City is huge, so who knows about that scale? But it's definitely
the city. I don't know if it's
incredible.
that big compared to like Miami though. I mean, when you think about it, like in a sense of size wise, if you do the comparison.
Well, I mean, what happens in New York, and from working there, I was also amazed when I actually realized, because New York City is one thing, of course, Manhattan's one thing.
Yeah.
I was tucked away in an office, in Midtown Manhattan, but then all of a sudden I noticed, hey, my coworkers are not only from here, they are literally coming from, very far places in New Jersey, Long Island.
Yeah, that's true.
I had a couple of guys that worked, Westchester County, which I'm not even 100% sure how far out it is, but it has a very, very, very wide reach. And then furthermore, we actually realized that there was people and projects and things we were connecting to that were much further out in Connecticut. There was a lot of connections that we were making there in that office that were going to our offices, in North Carolina, here in Florida. So much business for so many companies, and New York has a huge reach. Not only the people that live there, but it's a huge reach.
Oh yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So that's why I'm okay. Being from Miami and being raised there, it's an incredibly big city. I'm still impressed with how much it's growing now.
Yeah,
I still acknowledge that New York is a very, very, very.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was born in Manhattan, so it's like totally get it. I was in FDR Drive, 14th Street, so it's like I totally get that. What I see what's happening though is the difference is night and day when it comes down to local municipalities, and if somebody of any kind of wealth, or if they want a future, your goal is that you don't want to pay a state tax. Your goal is you don't want to pay these little municipality taxes. At the end of the day, to me, it's like, if a municipality in a city has been around for God knows how long, like, I would think you would get better at what you're doing and driving down the cost. Kind of like technology. The very first phone that came out was the size of a freaking brick, right? So the evolution of a phone should be the same way of, to me, municipalities and studies, is because that should be everything should kind of go off of the phone. I think of, like, if you look at the phone, what was the phone, right? So in the beginning, this is a great example. This was the phone, right? And it got bigger, small, and then now it's literally more powerful than the computer that put a spaceship, right? Which they spent billions of dollars on that computer system, and now we have that in our hand, right? And it's way cheaper, way more affordable. But now when you look at municipalities and the structure of doing development, it's like flipped. It's actually getting harder to build than it is easier, and way more expensive on the municipality side, because impact fees too, you have to pay that up front, and to figure out there when they say, oh, well, you can get a grant, you can get that. Yeah, that takes another year, or it takes
apply for this and get into that. And actually, everything has more steps.
That's why you have to me, you have to have a lot in the funnel, to put it in. And that's why I see less growth in New York than it would ever be, to me, and where we're at, Central Florida.
Yeah, a place that's established, as in we are still really growing and coming in. And what happens, and in Miami, I've had a lot of opportunities to work with reviewers and work, with I've always been on the consulting side, but I've worked inside of public agencies. So I've seen, and I mentioned, these are normal guys, but what happens is that they have a lot of responsibility put on them. Yeah. And for example, a city like Miami that has such incredible growth, a lot of them, we are talking about a lot of what's going on. And as we're saying, government efficiency, all this, we know that they are slow to growth.
100%.
So what normally happens is that right now, every single time I go down to Miami, which is very often, it's like there's new build, there's more of this. My neighborhood is totally transformed. It's so many things are going on. And so that regulations, all these stuff, they're still tied to that. And I feel that in a way, a lot of these guys are definitely for development. They want to see this. They want to see it go along. So they find a way to help you, but they're also, stuck and overwhelmed by
they got a job.
The system that they have. Exactly. They have the job.
At the end of the day, they got a job. They're an employee. There's nothing wrong with that. Look, I was in the military as well. So it's like,
so a lot of my ideas are, okay, we know these issues. In a sense, it's not, I don't know whose job it is to solve them, but they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So as us that we are directly affected and, within this, how do we approach these issues? How do we put that, in everyone's head? How do we make this an issue that we're all aware about where the community's saying, oh, we need, the next comprehensive plan, but we're not only going to do it, in-house, we need to reach out to the developers of the community and to, get the input so we can all streamline the process.
I 1,000,000% agree with you. And to me, what I look at is like developers are the one that develop the world, period. It's not the municipalities.
I mean, we all need each other, right? But the developer, and I'm talking about responsibility, but the developer is the one that's willing to take the risk and the responsibility of putting everything down and like, all right, we need to build this.
And you got to create the financial revenue. Like at the end of the day, it's got to make sense. for the area, and somebody's got to do it.
In the same way, the engineer, I have the responsibility of, I'm going to sign off and design your project, and then later on we have a failure.
You're in between both worlds.
Exactly. So I have to make sure that these things collide. So I can see how, we need to make this easier, so I can make my job easier, so we can, lower price, so we can make everyone money and actually, and I say this a lot. Money's one aspect of it, but as an engineer, this might be very nerdy, but my real thing is, just seeing the city, the city where you are develop, grow.
Yeah.
I drive around town. I'm like, oh, I worked on that. I was in this.
Dude, 100%.
It's something silly, but I really enjoy that. So it's really important to me to think about these problems and say, all right, this is not only my job. This is somewhat of our community, and how do we, tackle these issues? And they're not, maybe everyday issues for everyone. Yeah. Of course, but they are for us. So how do we get in front of that?
Oh, dude, I 100% agree with you, 1,000,000%. I mean, that's even like right now in this area, right now, this is called the Westgate area. And so in Westgate, I'm on the board for Westgate. And right now we're coming up with a plan of creating this as an art district, right? Awesome. And so if I wasn't a developer, if I wasn't I would never even have known this, first of all. And then now we're going to create something in this area. It may take a decade, it may take 20 years, but we know that this area, which is it's got a lower socioeconomic area to it, but also mixed in with light industrial, right? And so that is the Westgate area, but it's also connected to, it's a mile away from downtown, Bonnet Springs.
It's a great location.
Yeah, it's an amazing location. It reminds me a lot more like Channelside, or probably like an industrial spot in Miami that in the beginning wasn't all that.
Well, what became Wynwood.
Okay, Wynwood. Yeah. Okay. And so this area, now we're creating we're thinking about this would be Lakeland is the big thing, is the Swan. So these are kind of the symbols, and we're going to create things in this area, but it takes somebody like yourself, a civil engineer, to say, okay, yeah, this could probably make sense, or this won't make sense, or how do we work with municipalities to get some of these artist structures up as well and make it beautiful?
Yeah.
So how do you, go ahead, what are you going to say?
No. We were mentioning Wynwood, for example, and that was something that I'm simply familiar with it because of the fact that, I was growing up, and it's an area that I really saw change before my eyes. I ever since I got married, I of course lived in the suburbs. I grew up in the suburbs in Miami. Then once I got married, we moved downtown, and I lived there up until 5 years ago when we moved here to Lakeland. Mm-hmm. But basically the Wynwood area, I remember it so much because right before moving in with my wife, we were looking for an apartment with a good friend of mine. We were going to roommate together. And we settled on Wynwood because it's a central location, very close to downtown. Okay. But the area was completely industrial. It was all warehouses.
Really?
And, we were looking at apartments for, $600-$700. I mean, this was literally, very, very, low socioeconomic area as well.
This is beautiful.
And I want to say not even...
Wow.
I'm talking about this party started really 2010, 2011, around that time. Yeah. Little by little, the area started transforming. Yeah. And and I'm really literally going off of the top of my head. I'm not the Wynwood historian or anyone with real insight here. But from what I saw, it really seemed to be like it started with the art movement. There was a lot of galleries that started taking over old warehouse space. And little by little, the area really became somewhat known as an arts district. And they started doing these...
This is beautiful.
They started doing these events that was either, I can't remember if it was the first, second, fourth, the last Friday of every month. Yeah. Something like that, which was the art walk. And they would have a number of, not only artists come out, but of course, entertainment, food, music, all these sorts of different people would get together.
This is amazing.
The area, I remember back in the day, there was a few really sketchy bars, like Electric Pickle, Don't Ask Why I Know.
Yeah.
And a couple of spots like that.
Don't tell your wife about it.
And then,
right?
all of a sudden,
she
these
won't
spots
be listening
became,
to this.
all of a sudden, these spots became, the actual nice places to go. And
this
all the
is super
stuff
cool.
That's, so now
I love how they did
Wynwood,
this. It's just a normal building, but
No, Wynwood is, it's that, you should just go to Street View because this is just any place you walk. But what happened with that is all of a sudden, we went from the apartments that I was looking at for $600, and we ended up nowadays. I doubt you can get something like a studio for like $3,000.
No
You're probably
way.
lucky. You're probably very lucky if you see that.
Really?
It is it is one of the most expensive areas in Miami now. by
No
far.
way. That's amazing.
But
Well, that's good
it's-
for them, the people that have lived there the longest. But I kind of look at it like, what was on the other side? I have a theory about how transformation happens in areas. Well, so what was the ritzy area next to Wynwood, but it wasn't obviously Wynwood. So Wynwood, let's say was lower socioeconomic probably until 2000. I don't know. You tell me if I'm wrong or something. But there must have been an area in a close radius that was very high dollar, already high dollar.
So Wynwood is in a great area is the thing. So if you
where's
see it,
Wynwood?
and if
This
you
area
that's
right here?
all that's Wynwood. It's slightly
Oh,
you broke it already.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was lightly drawn out, but Wynwood is basically located in a very central area of Miami. And if you see it, to the right you have Edgewater, which is
Super cool.
a neighborhood on the edge of the water, which is very nice. To the south you have downtown.
Okay. Let me see here. Okay, so where?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so yeah, you see the boundary there in red. So Edgewater directly to the right.
Oh, right.
That's
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, so
Edgewater. and
water's right here.
Yeah.
You're walking
So
distance.
you have Edgewater in Midtown Miami.
Yeah.
Midtown is also somewhat of a newer development, at least in my memory, but it's a nice area. Directly south of that, then you have downtown with all the downtown neighborhoods, Omni, Park West,
right here.
the Financial Center, and then
Yeah, this is super cool.
and then it keeps going. So yeah, and you see right to the west you have I-95, so there's great access to the
Look, they like
highways.
Superman. Okay. I like it. Yeah, this is amazing.
You have access to the beaches on the north and south side.
Oh,
You
that's
have
dope.
access to US 1. It is just in a great location. Simply that, when Miami develops and starts everything against the water, of course, is the best area. It goes
Yeah.
then after that. This ended up being the industrial area. And it took, I would say 2010 is when I really saw it like, all right, this is taking off.
Yeah.
And
That
so
makes a
I
lot
want
of
to say,
sense.
yeah, until then, it's gone. And
Now,
now,
does your family still have property over there or no? Or you
Um,
sold it and moved on?
So my family has actually, they're now a little bit more suburban even. So
Okay.
mostly in Pembroke Pines area, which is in Broward.
Okay.
Right around there. My in-laws are still in the Miami Lakes area.
Yeah, this
And I
is
still
super
do
cool.
have some, cousins and things like that down in the South Bay
Interesting.
area. So yeah, I still have family all around.
Interesting.
But yeah, Miami's a fun place. Wynwood is a very, very interesting case study. But I can tell you, I do not recognize a single street.
Wow,
It's really very different. Very, very different.
So let me ask you on the development side, which I know, obviously you're knee deep in. How do you save time and money for developers? So when developers approach you, what's kind of your thought process on that?
Well, so it always depends. It always depends because, as I mentioned, there's always the engineering side and there's really the general consulting side of what we
Okay.
do. In the general consulting side, it is really the big aspect of it is regulatory permitting, but also product management. And, on the flip side, of course, the engineering. But what we try to do on the engineering is really use all we have in experience and, knowledge to be as efficient as possible designing and putting these products together.
Yep.
So really what I look at is, basically what you were saying now. When you look at a property, you want to look at every single problem you can have, every single thing that's going to go wrong.
Yeah. A friend of mine
So-
says, "Where's the dead bodies?"
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, we look at that and basically try to say, okay, when we're looking at this, where do we have every single issue?
Yep.
How are we going to solve it? Try to come up with that. And as early as possible, start asking those questions.
Yep.
So we can really get ahead of the ball.
I agree.
So, mixed with that, I have also worked all over Florida. I'm also very aware, as I've been mentioning, regulations are different, things
Yeah.
are different. I'm not going to know everything. So
Yeah.
really take those steps, double check, triple check your boxes, and ask as many questions as possible.
I
And that's
agree.
really what it is. Normally, once we've done that as much as we can, we've beat the dead horse into, all right, we know that we have something that is going to go through permitting. What's important for us is, go through the least amount of cycles as possible.
Yes.
Right?
I agree.
If you have to, not only there's cost for review. There's
Yeah.
thousands of dollars each time you submit, but then also each time I have to start working on something again, that costs
Yeah.
all of us money. So
Yeah.
on the engineering side, it's really about being as efficient as possible, and asking the questions you need to ask them beforehand, because it's going to be much cheaper to ask a question than to fix things later. So
A million bajillion% agree with you.
Yeah, so that's one side of things. That's really the engineering side.
Mm-hmm.
When we're looking at everything else, whether it's project management, whether it's regulatory agencies, a little bit of the same approach. Ask all the questions you can. Know that you can get everyone on the same page, what they want to see, all of that. But at the same time, it's simply a lot of what you were saying. A little bit of what you touched on is everything else that we don't like to think about, which is scheduling, paperwork, organization, drawing out every single step of the process. What am I going to do at this time, at the second step, the third? What's step 1A, 1B, 2B?
Yeah.
But
so I know you're familiar with this site, just to kind of bring this one up, right? So this is a perfect example. I play the consultant developer on this one, and then you're the civil engineer and consulting as well. So this is a site that we have a client that Dr. Mateo, right? So he's a dentist. And so he had a site. On my side, we had two different roles. I helped negotiate the site to get the best terms possible. We negotiated a lower term, better terms to buy the site, and then kind of a thought process of what we're going to do moving forward. He had a family member that was kind of an experienced developer, but by the time I talked to him, didn't seem as experienced as I would have hoped, just because what I've noticed is if you're an experienced developer, you understand you can't barge your way into anything when it deals with municipalities. If they're stating something dealing with wetlands, or you want to play with them, because if not, they can make it worse for you. And this site had wetlands right here, and so we could even showcase it in another area of this deck as well. So the wetlands is a lot of wetlands. So do you want to chime in on this particular project, and kind of what's been your involvement in it, and then also kind of chime in what happened with the wetlands as well, which I think is a kind of an interesting thing that happens to some non-experienced developers when they push too hard. And then this is a perfect example. You push too hard, you're actually gonna decrease what is buildable rather than increase. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what's unfortunate about this particular case study is that we're still in the middle of it.
Yes,
so
we're still in the middle. It hasn't been approved yet.
Yeah, it hasn't been approved.
Yeah.
We don't have anything built. So that's why I see why you're doing it, though. You're doing it on purpose to have me for a second invitation, right? So we have to follow up.
Exactly.
Once we have it ready. But no, let's walk everyone through so they know. So basically, the doctor came to you first, then you came our way as well. We said, we have this property, we want to build these 3 buildings on there with, as we mentioned, all the infrastructure needed to support these uses, which is doctor's office and a couple of multifamily buildings.
Yeah, which will be right here. Doctor's office, 6,000 square feet, and we had 2 apartment buildings, so he can make some cash flow capital on the property. Go ahead.
So give you guys some examples of what we're doing right here in Central Florida.
Yeah.
So let's say you guys are in our neck of the woods. Same case, you want to come buy a piece of property, hopefully develop it.
Yeah.
You come up with your concept. You say, this is what I want to put in. You read all the requirements. You know, your parking spaces need to be 18.5 feet long and everything else. So we get to that point and we start talking to all the municipalities involved, to all the agencies that are going to have jurisdiction over this project. And I'm going to mention them for this specific case, but we had to deal with Polk County. Polk County Building Department are the ones that actually deal with specifically all the regulations, that are going to be improvements there, above ground improvements. We have to deal also with Polk County Utilities for the below ground improvements, which will be water and sewer. We are also having to go now with the Water Management District, with Southwest Florida Water Management District, which are the ones that are doing the environmental resource permitting for that. Besides that, we've also had to look into cultural resource surveys, assessments. We've had to get wetland delineation surveys presented at the site. And we've had to gather all of this information to be able to say, all right, we know everything going on here. We have all our information. We know we want to build. Let's take it to the agencies. And we've presented this information to the agencies, and they have not really liked what we've presented.
No.
And let's talk a little bit more about that. So here in Florida, we have a lot of regulations when it comes to wetlands.
Yes.
Some of those regulations are going to be
And this is the wetland area on this site.
That's the existing wetland area right
Yes.
there. Now, some of those regulations are going to depend on, the history of the site. They're going to depend on the health of the wetland, the area where you are. It's a number of issues, but particularly here at this site, we have a site that incorporates not only a wetland but a water retention area that encompasses several properties, not only this one. So there's drainage agreements that need to be maintained. There's as well as the wetland that needs to be
which looks like this.
That needs to be assessed. There we have the assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, with all the information and with everything that we were presenting, the agencies, from a point of view, have told us, and I'm going to be a little bit more specific here.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, when we've gone to Polk County Building Department, they've told us we can't actually build this much. We don't have that much density. We would have to go through a zoning change. And I'm trying to tie up some of the items we've talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to even achieve this site plan, we need to go through a zoning change. And zoning has to agree that this much density is actually what they envision for the area.
Mm-hmm.
For now, we know that the Planning and Zoning Board does not agree with our zoning, with our density, but that's something we're working through. At the same time, Polk County Utilities has told us that they can definitely provide, there is availability for our project, but that will come with stipulations that we help them continue to provide operations and maintenance for their existing facilities in the area and a number of things. So we have to accommodate and provide facilities for them to continue to operate.
I agree.
And then on top of that, we are still dealing with the Water Management District on how are we dealing with these wetlands, because we don't know 100%. Well, and let me take it back a step. We presented our wetland delineation. The Water Management District did not agree with what was presented in the delineation.
Which I just want a disclaimer, wasn't my idea that we do that, in a sense of, and it wasn't yours either. It's actually the client, again, his uncle was the one pushing the envelope. If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, was pushing the envelope and saying, hey, possibly can we get this? Possibly can we get this? And we're like, if we keep pushing this, it probably won't be good. And actually, that's what happened. So we had them initially, if I remember correctly, agree to like an area that possibly can still work and keep one of these apartment buildings, but it'll have to be moved. And now with the new requirements that they're saying, one of the buildings is definitely not going to be here. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So to clarify, basically, we've known that some of these requirements, we knew of some of this pushback. We expected it.
Yeah.
Basically, with the client in this particular instance, they were looking for ways that maybe we could get variances or apply for, maybe different conditions or see if the county would work with us in any way. Mm-hmm. That for now has not worked out. We have not really found any leeway on the requirements. So yeah, we were aware that we were going to get pushback on several of these items. As I was mentioning, they also did have pushback on our specific wetland lines. They believe the wetland is bigger than the area we initially presented. And that's simply part of the process. That's their job to verify what we give them, and it's that. And this is what I've been talking about as well. There was risk when he bought the property that he could or could not build this, and that's what developers put on their shoulders. That's why. That's what I understand. That's what I say. All right.
High risk, high reward too.
Yeah, exactly. There's people making putting risk into this. Just like I came out
one
day.
Back to this.
Just like I came out one day and I said, all right, I want to sell professional services. There's a risk that comes with it, and we assume our risk. We all assume our risks.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm in the same boat too. It's like I remember when, and it's always interesting just because I think in the beginning of any venture that you go into, if it's almost like the venture that's meant to be long term, you always kind of see, at least for myself, like I initially had a ton of great success on the houses, but it took some time to finally start getting from Mount Stupid to like actually slope of enlightenment. Like I know what I'm doing, right? Like yo sabe español, it's like, oh my, I'm talking
Aquí
Spanish.
estoy.
Yes. Arroz con pollo, café con leche. Oh, this is money. So it's like, you got it. I think it's the same exact route, at least now for me in development side. Like you first start, you're just like, you have a little bit of success. You think you know what you're doing. And then you just crash to despair because you're like, oh shit, I don't know anything. I was like, I didn't even think, like, I didn't know about X, or I didn't know about the wetland delineation, what happened, or certain things that come up. and it catches you off guard. We call it in development, we call it the third fist effect. So Peter Brown in his book about development, he talks about that. He's like, the first fist is coming. Second fist is going to come next. But the third fist you had no idea about. It's kind of like COVID. It was like, oh, snap, what's going to happen? So it's interesting. And we'll see, we'll definitely do a part 2 on what's going on with this site. And then, it is what it is. We've got several sites that me and you are working on.
We made this an open discussion. Next time it's probably going to be a case study, probably.
Yeah.
And we can walk them through an actual project. And that would be pretty good for the audience. They can know, exactly not exactly, because every project is different, but they get a good idea. What can I walk myself into?
And, correct me
the issues.
When I'm looking at development for myself, for example, we've got a site right now that we're working. We got 2 sites, a gas station site and another site off of Rucker Highway. Well, no, I'll go off of the State Road one. So I think State Road, I think it's this one right here. So this site, if I got the conceptual plans, hopefully they're saved. So I got several conceptual plans I'm playing with right now. And what I normally do is I like working on it. I like working on several conceptual plans. And then when I get something I think I like, that's when I go to you. Right. So because I don't want to waste your time with keep calling you about conceptual, because this takes a lot of time.
It takes a while to play with the boxes.
Plan, yeah. So what we do right now, I've actually probably about a month ago, I only do conceptual plans in-house now.
Awesome.
So and now what I do is when I like something, then I move it to you. So then it's easier. Because I just know it takes so much time. It's like drawing. You're just like, okay, draw me a house. You're like, damn, dude, you know how long it's going to take? It's like, and then we're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So, this is one idea. And then another idea. We have one idea of doing possibly light industrial buildings, right? Or self-storage, right? And so 3-story industrial, 800 storage units on one, 1,000 on the other, 4.5 acres, the other one. It's 10 acres total, right? And then we have another site, same exact site, but different idea. And now we're doing, hey, we could do storage for outdoor storage. So what comes up for me is whenever I'm looking at a site, if I know I want to dig into it, my first thing is figuring out what's possible visually of the site. Not even zoning. I don't even look at the zoning right now. Now it's just like, what do I think? What's surrounding the area? And then what may be possible on that site. Like this site, if you look on Google Earth, this is off an old state highway. And so 0 State Highway Road, Lakeland, Florida, it may pop up or it may not. We'll find out real quick. And so it's right next to, it's right over here. Perfect. Yeah, I got it. So this is the site right here. It's this section here and this section here. But if you look close, I got an auctioneer site right here of all these semi-trucks and parking. So in my head,
so it fits.
Yeah, in my head, I'm like, okay, this may fit. Now I'm working on a gas station conceptual plan because there's no gas stations on this side of I-4. There's only gas stations. There's only one 7-Eleven right here. But what I've always noticed when you've got these big facilities here, and so you're potentially, there's nothing wrong with having another gas station for when this traffic comes off, they could just get their gas and then move on. So we're playing with the site. So my side as a developer is to make your life easy.
Yeah, and you have to be on the creative side because you're going to sell it, right? What are you going to be able to sell? What it's really going to be?
Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at all different asset classes. I think I gotta have a good amount of experience now of understanding what people want. Like Opal Fuel, when we dealt with Opal Fuel, but then I dealt with Florida Gas and how the city, that whole deal. And then Lamar Agency now, dealing with the billboards on one of our sites. It's super fascinating because to me, this is like the cool stuff.
There's so many possibilities and it's kind of interesting. You're in control of it a little bit. You know what I mean? You're getting to dictate something.
Yes and no, kind of, right?
Yeah,
but
as I said, what you can sell, but but you have the direction of it.
Especially on the design aspect of it, which to me, this is always the fascinating site because then it's like, years from now, if it's not that site or... I got to
go. It's 2:10. I was supposed to
you got to get going? All right, so look, what we're going to do, first of all, Ricardo, thank you so much for being here, man. I truly appreciate it. I know so many people are going to appreciate this podcast as well. So if you want to find Ricardo, he owns Downtown Engineering as well. Is that the website, downtownengineering.com?
Downtowneng.com. But yes, sir, it's really truly been an honor. This has been a lot of fun. There is a lot more to talk about.
Yep.
So looking
sure.
forward to
Yep.
some of those case studies and stuff for next time. But
We'll definitely be talking
it's been
about
a real pleasure. Now, any of you guys that are out there, I really hope that this has been instructive. And if you guys reach out with any comments, anything for next time, really appreciate the feedback. And thank you so much.
That's it, man. I appreciate it as well, man. Hopefully everybody got a lot of life lessons as well, and a whole bunch of development lessons. Leave a comment below if you can. If you could, if you got a lot out of this, leave a 5-star review. If you got nothing out of it, blame Ricardo. It's his fault. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. My name is Franklin Cruz from True Investors, and this is Real Estate Geniuses, and we are out.